Hey guys, so I finally stopped crashing every 5 minutes and I was able to finish this build. And just quickly, if you are also crashing, just know that crashes mostly happen because of chat and skills. And there's nothing really you can do about that. You can try skipping Legion enemies and seeing if you would crash more or less. And GG is fixing those things. And now onto the build. And this is not gonna be an in-depth build guide video, but as always I will include path for building import code with this full build. The reason is that I would not really recommend minion instability, and instead I want to talk about SRS in general. If you don't know, SRS means Summon Raging Spirits, by the way. So in Legion we got this new unique amulet which gives a lot of damage and life to SRS, but also has a drawback. Summon Raging Spirits take 20% of their maximum life per second as haste damage. And the amulet itself gives from minus 17 haste resistance to positive 17 haste resistance. And this amulet is currently the only way to lower your minion chaos resistance, which also means that if you want to play minion instability Raging Spirits, it's gonna take a while for them to pop. So when your minion's life falls below 35%, they explode, dealing 33% of their maximum life as fire damage to surrounding enemies. And this damage can be scaled with minion damage, minion life, and debuffing enemies. Fire damage nodes, for example, on the passive skill tree would not affect it because it is minion damage and not your damage. Your auras like anger, for example, also does not affect it because when your minions explode, they no longer have the auras from you, so they do not benefit from auras. However, flat damage from minions like on visuals would affect the explosions as well. Now there is a shield called Malgaro's Lens, and with Necromantic Aegis you can give a shield to your minions. However, the shield only lowers elemental resistance and not chaos, so the shield is not going to help. So the idea of the build was basically the same as my Popcorn Skeleton build, which I would definitely recommend instead of this minion instability build. And the idea on paper actually sounds pretty cool. You summon SRS, they see the enemies, they seek them out, and they explode. It's like heat-seeking missile. And I wanted to focus completely on minion instability damage. In red tier maps, as you probably can tell, the default attack of my SRS deal barely any damage, and they only deal good damage when they explode. And in practice this feels horrible. It takes a bit over 4 seconds for SRS to explode and deal good damage. So imagine mapping, getting close to enemies, then summoning and not having any damage for 4 seconds. And what's worse, enemies do not see SRS, so they cannot attack them directly. They can still damage with AoEs while trying to hit you, which also means you are very vulnerable, and you need to either have very good defenses or be very mobile to be able to escape from enemies. Which is what I try to do. I try to be mobile and just flame dash all around. But I do have Stone Golem as a meat shield. It does help split the aggro from enemies so that not all the enemies focus on me. Besides, Stone Golem with the slam does stun enemies, and it also gives you regen. And as a summoner who doesn't really have any other ways to recover life, it's pretty good. Of course you can have other minions like zombies or specters as a meat shields, but I do not have enough sockets for that. So having some meat shields while playing some Raging Spirits is almost a must, but you also need some decent defensive layers. And for that I have couple things. First of all, I am using catchment damage taken with Immortal Call and Flesh Offering to destroy corpses. You may also choose to use high level Steel Skin and cast it manually when you see that big damage is coming towards you, but you would not be able to use avant-garde skills like Immortal Call. And as for Molten Shell, it's only worth using it if you have decent amount of armor. And I have only 5.8 thousand armor with the Granite Flask, so it's nearly not enough. You would want at least over 10,000 armor to use Molten Shell. Then another thing that helps a lot is the new Flesh and Stone aura. When you are in a sand stance, nearby enemies are blinded, and enemies outside the AoE of the stance do less damage to you. And then I got Arctic Armor, and it definitely helps a lot. I was kind of surprised how much it helps. It mitigates physical and fire damage when you are standing still, so basically every time you are casting. And then I got armor based body armor with 2% physical damage reduction, which also does help a bit because it seems like Legion is mostly physical damage based. And lastly, I also have Aspect of the Spider, but this time not on the gloves. And this time I have it on a rare belt, and Aspect of the Spider slows down nearby enemies and also increases the damage they take. You may also use Curse on Hit with Temporal Chain, but I wanted a bit more damage so I didn't go with that. So again, while playing pure SRS you want some meat shields and you want some good defensive layers and pretty high mobility. Now, like I said at the start, I would not recommend to fully focus on minion instability damage, and maybe do like a hybrid focusing on the default attack damage and using minion instability as an extra damage. And actually, Summon Raging Spirits is very strong choice for this league, and I really want to remake this build and do like a proper SRS build without minion instability or just with minion instability as extra damage. The drawback from the amulet can be easily countered by getting positive chaos resistance for your minions and getting a bit more regen maybe, and not focusing so much on minion life. Actually, I saw Zizran doing similar build, but more speedy build I guess, and the clear speed can be very decent, but it does require pretty expensive helmet and necromantic aegis with Victoria's Charity Shield to give more speed. And of course, talking about speed, I did not use it, but if you want them to be faster, of course you need rings with minion movement speed, which you can get from essence crafting or bound fossil crafting. However, this hybrid setup between minion instability and default attack damage, I think it's not gonna scale very well in the red tier maps. So if you want to farm mid tier maps, it can work, but if you want to go for the end game, I think it's better to focus completely on default attack damage and maybe just have minion instability as a bit of extra damage. Another thing to help with the clear speed is Unleash support gem. Personally, I don't think that it's worth it. For map clear it does work pretty well, but it takes a bit over 2 seconds to get full Unleash, stacks, to fully benefit from a maximum amount of Unleashes. And of course against bosses you're not gonna be waiting every 2 seconds. Spell Echo I think is also a bad idea, and instead I'm using increased area of effect support gem. And for bosses I do swap that gem for concentrated effect. Increased AoE does help with the clear speed a lot, and one pop can clear all the enemy pack. However, that also means that you have to get pretty decent amount of cast speed, and your DPS is actually going to be average minion instability explosion damage multiplied by your cast speed, and not by the amount of maximum SRS that you can have. So in my case I did get decent amount of cast speed from the passive skill tree, some cast speed on the staff. Also I trigger a low level arcane surge with flame dash, which also gives a bit more cast speed. And I also do have onslaught flask, and you want to get your cast speed, your casts per second, to be as close as possible to 5, because with 5 casts per second you can reach maximum SRS before they explode, and in my case I have 4 casts per second. So in the end I can summon up to 16-17 SRS before they start exploding. And by the way, in all the clips you are seeing, I only have level 19 SRS. With level 21 SRS and level 20 other support gems you can reach much bigger damage. I'm also using 6 link staff with +2 to fire gems which affect SRS, and also some cast speed and crafted hybrid minion life minion damage mod. You may also use +2 minion staff, which you do get from the temple, but getting +4 staff would be nearly impossible. Even +3 is difficult to get and very expensive. And keep in mind that some Raging Spirits do not have attack tag, so +2 to melee skill gems would not raise some Raging Spirit level. And the stuff like this is pretty easy to get. I just bought a 6 link staff for like 15 heals or something like that. This is item level 77 by the way, and I just alt regaled until I got +2 to fire gems, got cast speed luckily, and then just crafted the mod. This also means that the mana cost is gonna be a bit higher. Now for SRS links in the staff I am using minion damage, minion life support, combustion, fire penetration, and increased area of effect, which I do swap for concentrated effect for bosses. In fact, instead of combustion you can use elemental focus and completely ignore ignites. But don't you just love seeing enemies on fire? Alternatively, I was using the helmet, Elder Helmet, with +2 to socketed minion gems and minion life, ideally as well with minion damage, so it would be a pseudo 7 link instead of like this pseudo 6 link, and then dual wield scepters with minion damage, which you can get from the temple, with cast speed as well, and then either flat mana or mana regen. And with dual wield you can get more cast speed easier and more mana regen, which you do need because of increased cast speed. And by the way, this is what I initially did. I went with the Elder Helmet and dual wield. Also from the passive skill tree I got Dark Arts And the nodes behind that also gave more cast speed and cooldown recovery speed for movement skills, so my flame dash was pretty fast and can use pretty frequently. And the dark arts itself also gives a lot of cast speed and also a bit more mana regen. And that also means that you don't need as much max mana and mana regen from the passive skill tree elsewhere, especially if you can also get 1 or 2 rings with minus total mana cost of skills, which do drop from the temple or from the legion. Oh, and very important thing, if you can get helmet enchantment for summon raging spirits, which does give a chance to summon an extra raging spirit, that would be literally like a more damage multiplier for your DPS, at least for minion instability, because it would mean you wouldn't need as much cast speed and it would be just easier to summon more SRS in less time. Now, to boost my SRS minion instability damage, I'm also using Aspect of the Spider like I mentioned before, which is on the belt, but for that I do need to be close enough to enemies. Then I have Ball Lightning with Curse on Hit Flammability, which also triggers Elemental Equilibrium from the passive skill tree. And this too works because it is a debuff on an enemy. I also have Scorching Ray linked with Spell Totem and Multi Totem. This is to apply fire exposure to debuff enemy even more. High level Flame Dash linked with level 1 Arcane Surge and increased duration support gem. And I also need increased skill effect duration to increase the mana cost, because I also have reduced mana cost from the passive skill tree. By the way, if you're going with the dual wield and the good helmet, you will have more room for more sockets, so you would have more flexibility on how to build it. You can also fossil craft a helmet with nearby enemies have -9 to fire resistance, but for that of course you would have to be close to enemies. By the way, for the Ascendancy nodes, first I went with the Puppet Master to get more minion movement speed. Then I went with the Commander of Darkness to get more resistances for me because I had resistance issues. And you only get this when you're using something like Clarity. Surprisingly, despite Flesh and Stone having an aura tag, it does not trigger this node. Then from Merciless Lab I got the Invoker, which sadly also gives minion regen, which slows down the minion instability explosions, but it also does give a lot of minion life and minion damage. And then from Uber Lab I decided to not mess with specters or zombies and just pick the minor nodes, which also gives minion damage and minion life. On the jewels I tried to get percentage life for me, and then either minion life, minion damage, or cast speed, or resistances if you need. Minion life is better damage multiplier than minion damage. And that is pretty much all. Like I said in the video description, you will find path of building import code for this build, but I would really suggest you to do non-minion instability version and just play with SRS normally. Oh, and I guess one last thing, and if I don't mention, someone will definitely ask that in the comments below. Of course you can use both Popcorn Skeletons and Popcorn SRS in the same build. Personally, I probably wouldn't do that. You would probably have to sacrifice many things, but that's up to you how you would want to do that. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll